I've heard a lot of people say, why is Michigan playing the victim? Why is the president coming out in supporting these cheaters? Why all of a sudden is Michigan Nation up in arms? They broke the rules, they cheated, they got punished. It seems really fair, right? What is with all of these Michigan fans acting like it's such a travesty what's going on? They're the ones that broke the rules. Well, let me tell you what Michigan Nation is actually upset about for anybody that's been wondering. So the first thing is they haven't been afforded the due process that is afforded to every other team within the conference or within the nation. And what I mean by that is when accusations come out, when there's allegations, every single team should be afforded the right to look at the evidence, say, yes, we did this, or yes, we didn't do this, or we did some of these things, allow us to explain exactly what happened. And then there's a litigation process, very similar to the judicial system of the United States in some ways. In other ways, it's not. Michigan has not been afforded this process. As a matter of fact, the Big Ten is ignoring their own rules and bylaws about this. So in the Big Ten, their bylaws specifically state that punishment in these circumstances should be passed down by the NCAA or the Big Ten to avoid redundancies in punishments. Well, if the Big Ten hands down their punishments before the NCAA investigation has concluded, then what they're saying essentially is we're going to punish Michigan before we have an investigation, before we have all the facts. And then they've even said we reserve the right to punish them further after this. And it's like, that's not how an investigation of allegations works. Michigan hasn't even had a chance to respond. They haven't even had a chance to represent themselves in this situation. And so that's one thing right there. I'm just getting started. That's one thing. Okay, the Big Ten went ahead and they cited the sportsmanship policy. Now, this is a big deal, right? Everybody's been throwing this around, the sportsmanship policy. It's interesting that they did that because they came out and they said they have zero evidence that links Jim Harbaugh to Connor Stalions. And of course, Connor Stalions is the individual that committed these supposed violations, right? And I don't think anybody on the Michigan team or fan base or within the Michigan organization is saying that he's squeaky clean, he did nothing wrong. We'll get into that a little bit in a second. But what Michigan is saying is that Jim Harbaugh didn't know about it. And a lot of the doubters there might be saying like, oh, of course he knew about it. He was the mastermind behind the whole thing. Well, the NCAA said we have absolutely no evidence that links Jim Harbaugh to this thing. The Big Ten said we have absolutely no evidence that links Jim Harbaugh to this thing. The sportsmanship policy that's in the Big Ten's bylaws, it says you have to punish either the individual who committed the offense or the institution as a whole. And so the Big Ten comes out and they say, they cite the sportsmanship policy. And the reason they did that is because the sportsmanship policy allows the commissioner to pass down a punishment without this lengthy process. Well, he suspended Jim Harbaugh, who is not the guy that committed the offense, which is directly against the bylaws. And to find a little gray area loophole here, what they essentially said was, we're punishing the university by removing their head coach. That is such horseshit. They're getting into semantics there. It's complete horseshit. And then, by the way, the sportsmanship policy has never been used for instances like this. It's always used for if a guy tries to fight a referee or drops a racial slur or something, they step in and they're like, okay, this guy's got to go for a couple of days. It's never, ever been used in a circumstance where it's like there's an ongoing investigation. There's questions about what the facts are. That's not at all how it's been used. And so the Big Ten is presenting really flimsy evidence. Actually, they're citing press releases and social media rumors. They themselves say that a guiding principle throughout the enforcement process shall be that a case, whether major or secondary, shall be administered primarily by either the Big Ten or the NCAA. So I'm kind of doubling up on that one. They They came in and made their own ruling right there. And then what do? They cite player safety. They say Michigan knowing the other team's plays it's a safety issue for the other players. That's a joke. And the reason we know that it's a joke, and the reason why we know it's not a player safety issue, that's a buzzword that they're using to smear Michigan. Michigan didn't really gain a significant competitive advantage. And the reason we know that is because Michigan provided documents that show Ohio State and Rutgers decoding all of Michigan's signs, sharing them with Purdue before the 2022 Big Ten Championship. So what we have here is a situation where everybody steals signs. It's not a player safety issue. The Big Ten has been well aware that that's been an ongoing part of the game. And what they're doing is they're caving to the pressure from the media and Michigan's rivals. They're leaking info and communications through the media. ESPN found out before Michigan did that Jim Harbaugh was being suspended. How do you think ESPN found out before Jim Harbaugh and Michigan found out that Jim Harbaugh was being suspended? When they came to their conclusion, they're leaking these stories to our new nemesis, greasy Pete Thamel over there at ESPN. And I'm going to wrap up here, Matt, because I know I've been ranting for a while here. All of this showcases the selectiveness of these regulatory bodies. The NCAA is incredibly selective about how they enforce rules, which rules they enforce, and how they go about this. And this media storm that's been based on clickbait because Harbaugh and Michigan gets all this attention, it makes this look like the worst scandal in the history of sports. Well, tell me this. Is Connor Stallion sending people to go videotape or spy, from the stadium of other teams' signs and get the grainy footage of other teams' signs? Is that more of an infraction or violation than a team going out and literally buying players, pulling them away from schools that they're intending to go to, giving them money illegally outside of the realm of name, image, and likeness in this pay-for-play day and age that we live in? That is rampant right now, and the NCAA is turning a blind eye so they can investigate Michigan to the fullest extent of the law in a situation like this. And so from top to bottom, Michigan is not being treated fairly. Did violations take place? Yeah, I think we would all agree that there's been some violations. How egregious were they? Well, we don't know yet because the process hasn't played out, right? There's been no investigation. The NCAA hasn't concluded an investigation. The Big Ten hasn't even started an investigation. The entity that's punishing Michigan right now hasn't even started an investigation. So from top to bottom, this thing is a witch hunt, and it's completely out of line. And that's why Michigan Nation is so angered by what's going on.